Here's some news you won't hear about in the French media. In the New York Times, just a couple of days ago, the headline said, "The quiet flight of Muslims from France." I just want to read some paragraphs from this extraordinary article, which, as I say, you won't hear about in France. There's almost a complete blanket on this kind of news. The article in the New York Times says, "All the talk of France's presidential election campaign is about immigration. But it is the expanding emigration of French Muslims that points to a deeper crisis for the country." So immigration is obviously people coming to France, coming here. Emigration is when people are leaving the country. So this is the quiet flight that we won't hear reported in the French media, but it's in the American media. So the article says, ahead of the elections in April, so that's just April the 10th, President Emmanuel Macron's top three rivals, who are expected to account for nearly 50% of the vote, according to polls, are all running anti-immigrant campaigns that fan fears of a nation facing civilizational threat by invading non-Europeans, in other words, Muslims. The issue is top of their agenda, even though France's actual immigration lags behind that of most other European countries. The problem barely discussed is emigration, i.e. people leaving the country. For years, France has lost highly educated professionals seeking greater dynamism and opportunity elsewhere. Can you guess where? But among them, according to academic researchers, is a growing number of French Muslims who say that discrimination was a strong push factor and that they felt compelled to leave by a glass ceiling of prejudice, nagging questions about their security, and a feeling of not belonging. And of course, Muslim women can't wear the hijab in many areas of public life, effectively barring them from employment. The article continues, "The outflow has gone unremarked upon by politicians and the news media, even as researchers say it shows France's failure to provide a path for advancement for even the most successful of its minority group, a brain drain of those who could have served as models of integration." And then there's a quote here from Olivier Estèves, who's a professor at the University of Lille's Centre on Political Science, Public Law and Sociology, who surveyed 900 French Muslim émigrés, people who left the country, and conducted in-depth interviews with them. He said, these people end up contributing to the economy of Canada or Britain. That's where they end up, in the UK or in Canada. France is really shooting itself in the foot, he says. And I can agree with that. In London, there are lots and lots of French people. French Muslims, the New York Times continues, estimated at 10% of the population, occupy a strangely outsized place in this campaign. This is the presidential campaign. And even if their actual voices are seldom heard, you rarely hear a Muslim voice in the French media. It's always people talking about Muslims, non-Muslims, but very rarely, if ever, Muslims themselves. The article says, it is not only an indication of the lingering wounds inflicted by the attacks on 2015 and 2016, these are the terrible terrorist attacks which killed hundreds, but also France's long struggle over identity issues and its unresolved relationship with its former colonies. The New York Times doesn't mention them, of course, but Algeria would be one big former colony that really there's still major issues there. They are being linked to crime, they being Muslims, are being linked to crime or other social ills through dog whistle expressions like zones of non-France, used by Valérie Pécresse, the centre-right candidate, now tied with the far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, for second place behind Macron. They are singled out for condemnation by the far-right television pundit and candidate Eric Zemmour, who has said that employers have the right to deny jobs to Black and Arab people. So that's that. Moving forward further in the article, there's actually mentions a Facebook group that exists for French Muslims living in London, which now has 2,500 members. I didn't know that existed, actually. The article continues, newcomers to Britain surged before Brexit. This is from France, adding that they were mostly young families and single mothers who found it difficult to find jobs in France because they wore the Muslim veil, because women wore the hijab. Only recently, it says, have academic researchers begun to form snapshots of French Muslims who have left the country. And there's one quote here from a French academic from the University of Liège in Belgium who studied this. He said that many young French Muslims have been disillusioned that they play by the rules, doing everything that was asked of them and ultimately been unable to lead a desirable life. So even when you try hard, you still are not allowed to succeed. There's an interesting snapshot here from Elise Safi, age 37, a marketing executive at the London operations of StoneX, an American financial firm, who grew up in a town in eastern France, where his parents settled after arriving from Tunisia in the 1970s, and his father operated a spinning machine at a local textile factory. Like his own parents, Mr. Safi ended up making a new life in a new country. In London, he met his wife, who is also French, and found an easygoing diversity unimaginable in France. And Mr. Safi says, at corporate dinners, there might be a vegetarian buffet or a halal buffet, but everyone mingles, he said. The CEO shows up and he has a turban on his head and he mixes with his employees, end quote. Remarkable. That wouldn't happen in France. The Safi's family, they miss France, but they decided not to return, partly because of their worries about their 2-year-old son. What are they worried about? In Britain, I'm not worried about raising an Arab child, Mrs. Safi said. In 2020, anti-Muslim acts in France rose 52% over the previous year, according to official complaints gathered by the government's National Human Rights Commission. Incidents have risen in the past decade, sharply rising in 2015. A rare official investigation in 2017, notice it's rare, found that young men perceived as Arab or black were 20 times more likely to have their identities checked by the police. In the workplace, job candidates with an Arab name had 32% less chance of being called for an interview, according to a government report released last November. Now, I've heard this story many times. People I've met here in France and in Britain who have Arab names have said, look, if you've got an Arab name, you're not going to get a job in France. And this is corroboration now, according to a government report issued last November, that if you have an Arab name, you have a 32% less chance of being called for an interview and thus getting a job at all. Despite her degrees in European law and project management, Miriam Grubo, 31, said she was never able to find a job in France. After half a dozen years abroad, first in Geneva at the World Health Organization and then in Senegal at the Pasteur Institute of Dakar, she is back in Paris with her parents. She is looking for work abroad. To feel like a stranger in my country is a problem, she said, adding that she just wanted to be left alone to practice her faith. This is very, very sad, very touching, heartrending stuff. And then, well, that's it really. I'm going to link to the article in the New York Times below. Things are pretty bad here in France, it is true. And this election, this president election, which we are going to see take place on April the 10th, is fanning the flames of Islamophobia. And as the article points out, emigration, people leaving the country because of this, is not reported here. People like to think this country is absolutely amazing, the best in the world and so on, but people are leaving because they feel discriminated against, they feel they're not welcome, that they can't succeed and practice their faith unmolested. And that's unfortunately the reality of France today. I wish it wasn't so. Until next time.